In the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, we find accounts of the imprisonment and death of John the Baptist, as well as the miracles performed by Jesus. The chapter begins with Herod, the ruler of the region, hearing about Jesus and believing that he was John the Baptist raised from the dead. He feels remorse for having John killed, as he recognizes John as a righteous and holy man. However, Herod succumbs to the pressure of his guests and, to fulfill a promise made during a feast, orders the beheading of John the Baptist. After the death of John the Baptist, Jesus withdraws to a secluded place, but a large crowd follows him. Jesus has compassion on the people and performs the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, feeding around 5,000 men, plus women and children, with only 5 loaves and 2 fishes. After this, Jesus instructs the disciples to get into a boat and go to the other side of the sea, while he dismisses the crowd and goes to the mountain to pray. During the night, the disciples face a storm at sea. Jesus comes to them, walking on the water, and Peter asks to walk on the water too, but he begins to sink due to his lack of faith. Jesus rescues him and calms the storm. Arriving on the other side of the sea, in Gennesaret, Jesus is recognized by the people, and many bring their sick to be healed. Everyone who touches Jesus is healed of their infirmities. In the 14th chapter of Matthew, we witness the sadness and injustice surrounding the death of John the Baptist. Jesus demonstrates his compassion by feeding the crowd with limited resources and shows his power over the storms by walking on water. The chapter ends with the healing of many people who are brought to Jesus seeking healing. This chapter teaches us about the compassion of Jesus, his power over nature, and his ability to perform miracles. It also serves as a warning about the consequences of lack of faith and reminds us of Jesus' love and care for the needy. In the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus confronts the Pharisees and teaches about true purity and the importance of God's commandments. The Pharisees and scribes criticize Jesus' disciples for not following the tradition of the elders by eating without washing their hands. Jesus responds by questioning their hypocrisy and states that it is not what enters the mouth that defile a person, but what comes out of the mouth, for what proceeds from the heart is what truly matters. Jesus calls the crowd and teaches about true purity. He explains that it is not external things, such as impure foods, that defile a person, but rather impure intentions and thoughts that come from the heart. He lists a series of sins, such as murder, adultery, theft, and falsehood, and emphasizes the need for an inner transformation. A Canaanite woman approaches Jesus, crying out for help for her demon-possessed daughter. Initially, Jesus seems to ignore the woman, but she persists and demonstrates great faith. Jesus commends her faith and heals her daughter, showing that salvation and healing are available to all, regardless of their ethnic background. Next, Jesus performs another miracle, feeding a crowd of 4,000 men, plus women and children, with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. After they are satisfied, 7 baskets full of leftovers are collected. In the 15th chapter of Matthew, Jesus confronts the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and teaches about true purity, emphasizing the importance of pure intentions and thoughts. He shows compassion by healing the Canaanite woman's daughter and performs a miracle of multiplying the loaves and fishes to feed the crowd. This chapter teaches us about the need for inner transformation and the significance of persistent faith. Jesus emphasizes the universality of salvation and healing, demonstrating that God's grace is available to all. He also displays his divine power through the miracle of multiplying the food, providing abundance for those who follow him. In the 16th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus continues to teach, perform miracles, and reveal his identity as the Messiah. Initially, the Pharisees and the Sadducees ask Jesus for a sign to prove that he is the Messiah. Jesus rebukes them for their lack of spiritual discernment, saying that they can interpret the signs of the times, but they fail to recognize the true sign of the Messiah's presence among them. Next, Jesus warns his disciples about the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, referring to their doctrine and hypocrisy. He cautions them to be vigilant against these negative influences. Jesus then goes with his disciples to the region of Caesarea Philippi and asks them, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" The disciples report the various opinions of the people, and Peter declares that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus commends Peter for this confession of faith and affirms that the revelation did not come through flesh and blood but from the Heavenly Father. Next, Jesus begins to teach his disciples about his own death and resurrection. Upon hearing this, Peter rebukes Jesus, but Jesus reprimands him, calling him Satan and saying that he does not have the mind of God. At the end of the chapter, Jesus teaches about the demands of following him, denying oneself, taking up the cross, and following him. He speaks about losing one's life in exchange for salvation and warns that gaining the whole world is of no value if one's soul is lost.